That's better.
Okay, see if that'll adjust. Okay. It's behind me here. I got a mirror. That's not bad. A little informal, but what the hell?
Yeah, that's okay, Steve. We have contacts, so that's great. Yeah. So it's very nice to meet you.
Okay, we hadn't met before. I thought maybe we had.
No, we didn't meet before, but I think we talked before.
Oh, okay. I went to Belgium twice. I thought maybe I saw you then.
Yeah. So, Steve, we have some questions that we like to ask you. And
Sure.
we've been following your work with PRG from the Belgian UFO Connection. And we are very interested in your work. And there are a lot of people who like to know certain things.
Sure.
So let me get started. How did you get involved in the world of ufology?
I don't like to call it ufology.
Okay.
That word is in the term is no longer applicable anymore. It was a government term anyway, a propaganda term. Extraterrestrial phenomena research, activism is the area that I'm involved in. And I got involved in 96, 23 years ago. I just decided I needed to do something interesting that meant something to me. I'd been bouncing around, not really doing anything significant. And I was tired of that. And this issue grew on me. I'd known about it for years. I'd known the ETs were here when I was a teenager, but so what? But by 96, I had a more mature view of the world, and I saw the importance of this should it be resolved. And I made the decision, okay, let's see what I can do. And it happened that I had read John Mack's book, Abduction, which affected me greatly because of who he was and the fact that it was a more scientific approach to the contact thing, which gave it credibility. I was aware of the symposium from 92. I actually saw that book. And so in the back of the book Abduction, there was the address and phone number for his organization in Cambridge that he was doing this work out of called the Program for Extraordinary Experience Research, PEER, P-E-E-R. And so I said, why not? I just called him up and tried to make a case that maybe I could be a volunteer for them. Maybe I could come in as a development volunteer. Had some background, business development, things like that. Karen Wesolowski was the manager at the time, maybe the managing director of PEER. She gave me a shot. And without actually meeting me in person, she said, okay, come on out. And so I left about a month later and packed everything up, got rid of everything else, drove to Cambridge, Massachusetts from San Luis Obispo, believe it or not, in the winter. San Luis Obispo was like heaven, and Boston was in 20 feet of snow. And I was so pumped up that even when I drove into Boston with the snow piled up above the buses, I didn't care. I thought it was great. I was in Cambridge, and I was going to be working, I'm going to be doing something connected to John Mack. That was pretty cool. Let me get rid of this. It's gone. So that's how I got started. And I didn't know exactly where it was going to go, but ultimately I figured it out. And I left there and went down to Washington, D.C., moved in with at a family home there, set up an attic office and registered as a lobbyist. No one had ever done it before. No one was stupid enough to do it before.
Yeah, you were the first man.
Yeah, first person that registered as a lobbyist. No money. I mean, let's face it, lobbyists generally get into that business for money. Though there are some that work for nonprofits and environmental groups, what have you, but they generally get paid, even from the nonprofits. But no, so, but that got me attention, and the Washington Post article and this kind of stuff. And off I went as a, quote, exo-political activist. And I have not regretted it. And by and large, feel very blessed that I had the opportunity to do something like that.
Yeah, you have a large work ethic. You do a lot of things.
It could be larger.
Yeah, but you have a lot of activities running at the moment, I think also. Do you want to elaborate on some of your activities?
Well, the latest project is different, new. After the To the Stars Academy, I'm sorry, the citizen hearing on disclosure was relatively successful, got a lot of coverage, and set me up for the political campaign that was coming. I went to Washington, hired my publicist, and we were able to get the story of the ET connection to Clintons into the press. Hundreds of articles were written. Could have been a huge story during that campaign, but the debate moderators never touched it. But we did force her and Podesta and her husband, Bill Clinton, to actually speak publicly about this issue in a limited hangout way. All good. We thought it was going to lead to something profound. In fact, I was pretty sure she was going to disclose. So when she lost the election, that project basically was ended. I went to London. I gave an interview in Moscow. First, I think, person to ever talk on Russian soil about Putin as the possible disclosure president. I got some pretty positive feedback from Russia on that, meaning that he wasn't happy. He was not unhappy about my saying those things in Moscow. I actually went down and walked around the Kremlin too, by the way. Not in, but just around. And then I finally came back in February. I spent a lot of time in California. But the big deal has been the To the Stars Academy, which was launched while I was still in London in October of 2017, which is why everybody but me, every one of my colleagues but me, ended up getting TV interviews. Right? I was in London. I was out of touch. I didn't finally get a request to do an interview about the TTSA until I was almost ready to leave, and it was from ABC Sunday Night News, but I didn't get it in time. By the time I got the request, it was too late. And I haven't been on since. I mean, but I don't have any regrets. I got to do my Moscow thing. So I came back and had paid very close attention to the Stars Academy and everything they're doing.
Yeah.
I quickly decided that this was extremely important. And as a result, I have been supporting their work ever since. I'm aware of the criticisms and they push back and so forth. I'm not surprised. People are not particularly confident in government now. They certainly don't trust the intelligence agencies in the U.S. or the politicians. So naturally, they're not going to just go get all excited and say, oh, wow, the truth has finally arrived. But the thing about it is the truth may have finally arrived. So I've been supporting it, watching it closely. I've lectured on it. I'll be lecturing again at the Alien Con Dallas coming up April 4 to 6. That's the 4th or 5th Alien Con, which is becoming a big event. It's connected to Ancient Aliens. In fact, there's going to be a 2-hour Ancient Aliens special. In the next month or two, I've heard December, I've heard October, but it's called Countdown to Disclosure. And I did 5 hours of interview for that. And I have a feeling that I'm going to get a substantial presence, which is good.
That's great.
And so that's kind of happening. But the thing was, I knew that the To the Stars was going to be the lead for a good while. And I learned that they had started talking to members of Congress in Washington privately, on background. Not publicly, because right now in the United States, you may have noticed, we're having this kind of a political kerfuffle going on here. It's only the biggest constitutional crisis probably in the history of the country, except for maybe the Civil War. And it's got...
That's funny, Steve, because I just published an article on the Civil War.
Well, good. Our Civil War or your Civil War?
Yeah, and on the website, on the Belgian website, about the extraterrestrial presence during the Civil War.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me if they were hanging around for that too. So that was a significant thing. They've been meeting perhaps over a year. We know some of the people they've been meeting with, Washington leaks a little bit, but the content has been kept private because Washington doesn't want to deal with anything else right now except the presidential issue. So they're doing their work in private, and that got my attention. I realized I needed to get back to Washington. So, which wasn't easy because I don't have big bucks. This is not how I roll. But I was able to finally work it out where I could come back to Washington. I had a place to stay, and I got a shot at possibly getting an office in the National Press Building. Ultimately, I was able to do that, and I'm now moved in. almost moved in completely at the National Press Building, where the National Press Club is housed. They're in the top floor, top penthouse. And we're 2 blocks from the White House. So that was good, right? I can use that. Yeah. But I also decided to launch, finally, my first podcast. Everybody else has one. I've not had one. Everybody else has written a book. I haven't written a book because I'm lazy. I mean, that's basically the reason.
Well, that's what I was trying to figure out. Why didn't you never wrote a book? You're like an activist.
I'm lazy and a procrastinator, and I got an attention span about 45 seconds, and then the internet didn't help that. I will write one unless I die. If I keel over, I won't. The last thing that'll be going through my head is, gee, I probably should have written it down.
So let me get back to the TTSA and your question. Like, so is this true that Tom DeLonge went to the Skunk Works, the military firm that created the stealth fighters, and that Tom DeLonge pitched a story to get the disclosure out?
The Tom DeLonge story is complicated. It can't be simplified to that. I'm sure he's going to write a book about it. I don't think it's been written about. I don't think he's written a book about it now. He got other books out, but not that. The one way to get a handle on this is to go and listen to a very important 4-hour interview he gave to George Knapp in March of 2016. I think it was March 17th, 16. This is, of course, Coast to Coast AM Sunday night. And he talks about what's coming. He doesn't give specifics, but he talks about what he'd been doing. And he says a lot. And you can get a good picture from that interview. And I think that was the beginning, or maybe the indication of a relationship between him and Knapp. And I think he and Knapp do have a relationship. And Knapp is very much supportive of Tom DeLonge. But essentially, it's an amazing story in that Tom DeLonge has been interested in the issue since he was a kid. He wasn't a big student, he had attention span like mine. So, he dropped out of high school, went back, I think got his GED. But he's a smart guy, and he was into music. He was a rocker. And so he started forming some bands, and he kept forming one after another until they got better and better, and doing business well. But he also, for whatever reason, once he was out of school and had to read, right, because they told you got to read this book. Once he didn't have that over him, he started reading books like crazy. So he was an autodidact, is what we call him. And UFOs was on his mind, so he's reading all these books. He got knowledgeable and actually connected up with Greer in the early 90s and was working with him in various ways. So he got really into the field, but always the music was there. The Blink-182 was making his money. Eventually he goes back into music pretty much. He leaves Blink-182 and then forms another band, Angel and Airways. Again, these are all successful projects. So the guy is astute. He knows how to do business, and he knows how to navigate the very, very treacherous world of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. He has not succumbed to that. So eventually, now he's got money, and he wants to get into the issue, but he wants to get into it in a big way. And because he had money, he was able to go to events anywhere in the country. If there would be an event going on where some high-level people would be there, could be military, could be corporate, whatever, that the public could attend, he'd fly out, get a motel or hotel, and he'd attend, and he'd try to buttonhole some people. He would try to, find whoever he wanted to talk to, and just talk to him a little bit and say, look, I have some ideas. I'd love to talk to some people inside. I don't know how long he did this. I think it was a while. What he didn't know, I don't think he knew, was that something was going on inside the military intelligence complex, independent of Tom. And what I believe that is that whether that you're in the CIA or just Department of Defense, Lockheed, Skunk Works, whatever, they were watching all these articles coming out about Clinton and the ET issue and the Rockefeller Initiative and everything. And they started seeing statements from her and from Podesta. They knew that Podesta had been talking to the issue going all the way back to 2002. They knew about the Rockefeller Initiative.
Yeah.
These are CIA people, right? They know this stuff. They, I think, looked at that and said, she is going to disclose. If she becomes president, and she was the leading candidate by far, she's going to go to the Pentagon and say, boys, it's up. Time's up. You had a nice run. You wouldn't let my husband know anything. You stonewalled him, but you're not going to stonewall me. I'm the first woman president, and I'm tougher than all you sons of bitches, right? And they're going, well, that's going to be a problem, because they, I think, rightly calculated that if a president were to announce the extraterrestrial presence, disclosure, of course, the political class would immediately gather around that president. They weren't going to blame themselves. They weren't going to say, well, the reason you didn't get told by the politicians until now, when we knew about it 70 years ago, is because of the military intelligence complex. Everything is secret and hidden, and they won't tell the presidents. They stonewall my husband. They stonewall Carter. They're the problem. In other words, they're going to the president and her party was going to throw the military intelligence community under the bus and make them the bad guys. They weren't happy about that prospect. They don't see themselves as the bad guys. They see themselves as defending the country, and they believe that the truth embargo and ET issue was part of national security. What to do? Well, they started to come up with, I think, an idea about we need to do something, maybe a group of former members of the military intelligence complex can form something, do something, and start helping this process along. And that would be a public relations positive for them. As it happened, that was pretty much the same message that Tom DeLonge had. And so at some point, they basically said, come on in, let's talk. And he started meeting with people, and he'd get passed around. He met with a lot more than Skunk Works people. He met with a lot of people. And over a period of time, a year, they formulated a project that I believe they planned on launching right after Hillary was elected. I can't prove it. They may say no. Fine, it's okay. If they make it clear that there's another plan, I'll change my theory. But that's what makes sense. And so this was a big, complex project, and Tom met with a number of people. Who made it happen? Let's just say that nothing happens there unless a lot of people inside the Department of Defense are willing to give cover to this project, and that these people wanted to do it. So but Tom helped them make it happen because they needed a front person. They needed a leader, a CEO who was not a former CIA intelligence undercover guy or a military person. They needed somebody that was didn't have security clearances prior and was well liked and known, had a following, this type of thing. And he fit the bill. And so, fine. They create this oddly named organization, To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science, with a 40-year-old rocker heading it.
Elizondo from the Pentagon is on the board.
Luis Elizondo is one of the teams on the board. You've got Steve Justice from Lockheed Skunk Works. He's on the board. You've got the longtime researcher Hal Puthoff. You've got Herman Kahn, CIA. And, of course, you've got one of the key people of all is Christopher Mellon, who is a high-level political operative.
And then you have the drip feeding mechanism that's going on, like the Pentagon has drip feeded, the Navy aviators, the NATO has put stuff in media.
And they didn't do this just to form an organization. They had a plan.
There's a plan.
The principal plan was all blown up when Clinton lost the election.
Yeah.
So it took them 11 months, and they finally decided what they were going to do, and they launched the project, launched the website, told the world who they were.
Yeah.
And they didn't wait very long, and they delivered a lot of information to the New York Times to be vetted for a story. And the Times vetted their information and put those stories out, and that was December 16, 2017. We're approaching 2 years since that came out. And that wasn't just drip. That was a major revelation.
Yeah.
All right. So much there to unpack. I have all the articles about this on my website, paradigmresearchgroup.org. I've got 400 articles related to the TTSAAS. So they announced the ATIP program, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, and they announced the involvement of Harry Reid, the former Senate Majority Leader, Bob Bigelow, the billionaire space entrepreneur. The program was funded. They talked about that. They provided the Times 3 gun camera footages of FLIR radar from intercepts of these craft from very significant events, the most important being the Nimitz. And they had one of the pilots come forward to confirm it. That's a huge story.
That's huge.
And normally, that would have been the story of the 21st century, except we're in the middle of a massive political crisis, and the media is all consumed by that. And so it had an impact, but then we get back to business as usual. So they've had to slow walk their overall plan while this political thing in America gets resolved. But they've done things like the series Unidentified on History Channel. That was they filmed a bunch of their efforts and work, and they put it into a nice series, 6 hours, six programs, which tend to give them more exposure and clarified some things. There were some very good shows there, some interesting information. They did that. Then of course they've been talking to movie people in Hollywood. God knows, who knows, but I'm sure high level people that I could probably not get within like 6 blocks of without being arrested. And more importantly, they started talking to members of Congress. That's a lot, but it's not as fast as they could have gone. They are, like everyone else, waiting to see what happens now. Now, and one of the things, though, that's notable, and that's what you were talking about, this drip phenomena, is that the effect of these men and one woman, 10 men and one woman, Gilpin is her name. I think she's a science attorney. The effect of that extraordinary revelations they gave to the New York Times and so forth really changed a lot of minds within the media, and also green-lighted a lot of people out there who were on the fence about what to do. And so some more witnesses started coming forward, particularly with respect to the Nimitz case. More pilots came forward. That was notable. Some documents regarding a very famous meeting, important meeting with Admiral Wilson from 2002 came forward. They emerged, right? This is notable. And then the Navy had a problem. The Nimitz event, which was the key evidence they provided in the New York Times, along with the gun camera footage, the Tic Tac, the pilot reports. Actually, they've now had, I think, 2-3 pilots that had spoken to that event. That was in 2004. And so the Navy had been sitting on that for 13 years and not telling anybody, not letting their pilots talk about it. And suddenly it's all over the New York Times. So the Navy's kind of got a bit of a problem there. And they felt they needed to do something. They needed to show that they're not just standing there with their arms crossed, refusing to be part of the solution. So one of the things that was tripped by the New York Times articles, it took a while, I forget how long, maybe a year, the Navy indicated that they were changing their protocols with respect to their pilots and these sighting reports. Then they announced that they were actually encouraging their pilots to report these things. Yeah. And then a few days ago, they went much further. And what the Navy did a few days ago was non-trivial. There has been a lot of pushback and criticism and theorizing about the To the Stars Academy and the people and claims of all manner. This is the internet, right? Yeah. Which is what happens. You can't stop it.
I talked to Nick Pope about the TTSA, and he supports it.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, it's not helpful. You got all these theories out there claiming that Luis Elizondo was this and the Tic Tacs were a drone and God knows what else. The Navy came out and said that footage, all 3 of the footages that they provided to the New York Times were in fact FLIR intercepts, FLIR radar of intercepts by their planes. In other words, they
the footage was real. It's real extraterrestrial activity.
No, they didn't say it's real extraterrestrial activity. What they said is this is footage from our planes. This is legitimate gun camera footage. Whether it's extraterrestrial, that's up to others to decide. Okay. And then the other thing they did, which was notable, is that they also in that same release said that they didn't authorize the release of those 3 pieces of footage, camera footage. And that was notable. First, basically, what was going on there is that the Department of Defense did not need the Navy's authorization to release that. They could release it. They don't need it. They could have gone to the Navy and asked permission, not permission, but and told them that they wanted to do this. But I don't think they did that, because if they had, the Navy might have said, well, no, we don't want you to do that. And they'd have done it anyway. And then a whole bunch of admirals lose face. So you don't do that. So they just did it, right? The Navy said, look, we didn't authorize it. And that was a way of covering themselves a little bit with those inside the military intelligence complex that don't want this project to go forward. There's plenty of people inside the DoD that do not want the To the Stars Academy to exist. But they've got enough cover inside that they are able to continue. They were able to get that footage, and they may get more footage. So the dynamic inside the Pentagon or inside the military intelligence complex is probably amazing and fascinating, but we don't know it. And we won't know it until some historians write about it in the future.
Yeah. And so they changed the name officially, like the UFO concept there was a term the military devised in Project Blue Book.
The effort, I've played a role in getting rid of UFO. I mean,
yeah.
I've been talking about that for a long time.
So it's UAP.
And even Hillary Clinton brought it up in one of her in a Kimmel interview on television.
What is the reason that it's changed to UAP in your
principal reason? The UAP and UFO mean the same thing: unidentified flying object, unidentified aerial phenomena. But the term UFO has been bastardized. It has been corrupted. It has been ridiculed. It has been used by the truth embargo to contain things. And so the term is simply not constructive. It's a destructive term. This happens in language all the time. There are a lot of words you can't use now that at one time were not necessarily that controversial. So UAP is a way of acknowledging. Not so much. You're not acknowledging there's extraterrestrials. What you are acknowledging by switching to that term is the truth embargo is real. It has been in operation for 70 years, and language has been part of it. And we need to change the language while we end this truth embargo.
Yeah. So, Steve, you know a lot about how the political mechanism works. I have seen that, and I was dying to ask you this question. Donald Trump. He said, I'm not a big fan of extraterrestrials.
Right.
Do you think that he is out of the loop? Because he doesn't have a military background.
Let's just say that, I don't know, I do not see him engaging this issue. I do not see him being extensively briefed, but I did learn that I believe he did get a briefing from the pilots, that he was in the same room with them. That's not the same thing as getting a full briefing from the CIA about the entire ET reality as the government knows it. But clearly, he has too many problems to deal with this. And I don't think he's in a position to deal with it, and I don't think the military intelligence community would be helpful. So I don't expect him to engage it. I think it's more likely Vladimir Putin would engage it than the current president.
So do we have a setback with his nomination in terms of the study of ufology and the disclosure?
Not the study, that continues, but the setback was obvious. Hillary was going to disclose.
Okay.
And she didn't win. So there was no disclosure, and we're 3 years on. And also note something. Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, even Barack Obama, and John Podesta all said something about the ET issue during that campaign. Not that campaign, but she's trying to become president.
Yeah.
Anything you say during a campaign is significant. Once she lost, however, they haven't said a damn thing. I think Podesta has said a couple of things in the odd interview, but they haven't said a thing. Interesting, isn't it? So what was going on there? It wasn't like, well, they're just interested in the subject and they talked about it during the campaign and now they're no longer interested in the subject. No. The plan was for her to disclose. When she lost, she wasn't going to be the disclosure president. Any chit chat that they now, or any interviews they give about the ET issue, risks the possibility the issue could explode and result in a disclosure president. And who would that be? It would not be her. It would be Donald Trump. And so they've kept exactly science. I mean, I think if I could ask her a question, I would ask her, how upset would you be if Donald Trump was a disclosure president? I think her honest response would be, I can't imagine anything worse. For her would be the ultimate defeat. She was this close to being the first woman president and the disclosure president. They would have built statues to her around the world, all gone. All right, but that disclosure thing's still hanging out there. Whether they'll touch on it again in the future, I don't know. But it wouldn't surprise me if you suddenly saw them jump in here pretty soon, because this thing is advancing very rapidly. Yep. But until the presidential political situation is resolved in America, I mean resolved, not hanging out for 4 years, we're not going to see too much definitive developments, but we are going to see developments.
And what's your take on Barack Obama, that he didn't use the disclosure himself?
I don't have firsthand knowledge there. I think Barack Obama accomplished his legacy the day he took the oath of office. He tried to be a good president. Yep. The Republicans basically took all the money on the way out the door after Bush lost. They just took it all, handed it out to the bankers and everybody else, and left the country in a financial crisis. They handed that to him and said, "Good luck, Barack." Then the Republicans stonewalled him in Congress, literally to the maximum. He really did not have the political capital to go in this direction. Yeah. However, he was a Democrat, and the Clintons, of course, knew about the ET issue. They'd engaged it in '93 to '96. So interestingly enough, Obama wins the election. He's not happy with Hillary Clinton because she and Bill went a little off the road there in dealing with him and upset many of his supporters, which is why she ended up losing. Nevertheless, he makes John Podesta his transition chairman to build a new government. He makes her the Secretary of State. He brings in another person from the Clinton administration who knew about the Rockefeller Initiative, Leon Panetta. I think he put him at CIA. And then they tried to bring in Bill Richardson, who was aware of the ET issue with the Clintons. They tried to make him Secretary of Commerce. All these people were connected to the issue and through the Rockefeller Initiative. So what was the plan? I think that he was read into their involvement. He was read in by them. He was not read in by the CIA. And I think he calculated that this is not my trophy to take. I could make a move on it, but he did bring in Podesta for 1 year as an advisor, and it was clear he was in there talking to him about the ET issue. But this is to be for Hillary. And the day that Podesta left his job at the White House after a year of advising, and this is about a year before the election, actually it was less than a year. It was like 9 months before the election, is he put out the famous tweet, heard around the world, which is my number one regret for 2014 was once again not getting hashtag UFO files released. That's a non-trivial tweet. That is a very significant tweet.
Serious.
So you sort of see what I'm getting at here. This was they helped him, and he was going to help them get that legacy. He was going to help her become president, and everything was pretty much going according to plan. In fact, as we know, Tom DeLonge, on behalf of the insiders that he was ultimately going to be working with, he approached the Clinton campaign. He approached Podesta and started engaging him secretly. I mean, there's nothing known about this. He didn't go to talk to the Republicans. Why did he approach this? Hillary was going to win, and We know about that because when WikiLeaks dumped all the Podesta emails out, there was about 90 or so that involved the UFO issue and Tom DeLonge. Outed people's names. I mean, it was awkward. It was really kind of awkward. It wasn't the worst thing, but it was still so that plan got exposed at that point. And that was a shock. However, I'm sure they felt that once she wins the election, they'll regroup and proceed according to plan. But when then she lost, the whole thing is up in the air. I am impressed that they got it together. I'm impressed that they were able to put it back together and get it out the door in October of 2017. It shows the commitment inside is not small. It's substantial. And so, as I said early on, since October 2017, the disclosure movement, of which I have been a part now for 2 decades, is being led by a group of former military intelligence personnel. I would never have predicted that. I did not see that coming, but I welcome it. And ultimately, I think it makes
I think it's time.
It makes it almost impossible to think that the truth embargo is indefinitely in place. No, its days are numbered. If they've been numbered for a while, and I have expectations that we're going to see something dramatic within the next 4 or 5 months.
So all these issues next to this topic of the political play field and the military, I think you know that the Vatican is also moving. They have the largest telescope in Arizona, the VAT.
Sure.
You know this. And they have Guy Consolmagno, who works for NASA and the Vatican, who is putting things out on the internet and into the media about extraterrestrials, and that they are observing these type of activities. So what's your take on that? They had in 2009, the Vatican had a study week or something about extraterrestrial presence with scientists and stuff.
Anyone could go online and just Google Vatican UFO and see the number of things that they've done over the last about 15 years, maybe a little longer, that clearly indicate that they are anticipating and preparing for disclosure. Of late, we have not heard much at all from them. It's just they kind of stopped, but that's mostly because the Vatican is embroiled in its own massive scandal. So until the church finally gets that in order, which is going to take some significant doctrinal changes, it's a little more difficult for them to. It's become difficult for them to put forward something this controversial. But they're already on record. They're already on record that they're not worried about AT disclosure. They're going to be fine. The church is going to be fine. They'll probably get some more members. But they have not directly addressed the issue in any significant way because of their controversy. So we have 2 huge scandals that are impeding history in a sense. These scandals are important, but compared to the extraterrestrial issue, they're trivial. But they're a big concern, and they take up space and time, and as a result, it's slowed things down. If it weren't for some scandals like that and a few other things, we'd have had disclosure years and years ago.
Oh yeah. So the Vatican is definitely a player in disclosure. Is that what you think?
Not active right now. It's a passive player, but it was active about some years ago, and it is ready. It will have no trouble moving forward if something happens. Now, whether they're talking to any world leaders and giving them advice or giving support, I don't know. Is it possible the Pope would actually try to make the disclosure event his? I doubt it. Again, because they have too much on their plate right now. They've got a major problem they have got to put to bed, and they haven't done it yet. And until they do that, I don't see the Pope making a move on this.
Yeah. You know our organization. We are the Belgian Connection.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we actually are very fond of is our crop circle investigations in Wiltshire in UK. Every year we study several of them, and that's a bit. That's why we got in contact with Nick Pope, who is also very interested in the topic. And there are really strange things happening in that area. And of course, people talk about fakers and crop circles that are not really created by something unfamiliar.
Sure.
But we have studied them, and with the BLT research team that used to have the lab work done, and we really saw that some circles are not made by humans.
I agree.
What's your take on that?
I agree. Were you out in the field this season?
Yes.
Okay. What was anything particularly different show up this season, or pretty much the same?
Yeah. Well, what we saw is that the Danebury crop circle, we had a boy there. So it was basically we had a report that there was a fresh circle. We were in the vicinity. We went there. We saw the circle firsthand. We could study it without people running up and down it. And there was a boy present with his mom, and it's on our website. And he saw a craft hovering above the circle that morning. And he went on camera for us. And the craft was not a drone. He knows what a drone is. The boy is named Charlie, by the way.
Yeah.
And that it was an area where there aren't drones allowed even.
You say craft.
Yeah.
Are we talking about a large disc or one of these small balls?
It's small. It's small, but it hovered.
Okay. It's like what has been seen before.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll see more than one.
Yeah.
And somehow they're generating the energy field that is laying down that circle. That's another. It's a nice reinforcing piece of evidence. I like that.
Yeah. We have put it on the website, of course, because we had the images. But there should be more investigation, I think, to the crop circle phenomenon.
Sure.
And we are working hard for it to get it done. And Jim Peniston, he's really interested in this, and he's trying to work with us on the matter. I haven't read his book yet. I'm busy doing it because it's a whopper. It's a really big file that he created. I don't know if you have seen the book.
What's the title? I've forgotten.
The Rendlesham Enigma.
Ah, yes. Okay.
Yeah, it's a very big one. It's the first one. He will write 2 of them. And I think we could work in the future to have a crop circle book related to that. And he will work with our team, I think, to have it done.
One of the tip-offs that one might consider, it comes under the classic dog that didn't bark, the famous story by Oliver Wendell Holmes story. The case was solved because a dog that should have barked didn't bark. This is another example of that. If you've got vast, complex glyphs suddenly appearing in fields all over your country, and you are not, and the situation is not skewed because of some policy like the truth embargo, the UK government would be all over it. They should have been studying it to death. They should have had people out there in high-tech equipment trying to see what the hell was going on. They never really did. They finally did some things mostly for show. That's a tip-off right there that you've got an embargo here, right? It's like the government's like, it's just some things turning up in the fields. What's the big problem? Nonsense. And so that's, again, the dog that didn't bark. They were supposed to jump on that and be on that and trying to find it out and telling them people, but no. It was like, and then Doug and Dave, God knows what they paid Doug and Dave to come out and do their shtick. Yeah. This is stupid, right? And while all this has been going on, we've had, 20 wars, a couple million have been killed, pick a country, you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. And so they're playing games with this incredible important issue while continuing to have their odd wars and bombing attacks and so forth. It's stupid and an embarrassment. And if I was a third party witness to all of this, meaning I guess you could say an extraterrestrial, but someone who's outside of the human sphere, I would be embarrassed for us. I would say, my God, this is what you're doing, and you've been evolving to this point for how many millions of years? You built advanced civilization, and this is how you do things. This is how you conduct your affairs. Like little children scared in the woods, right? Don't tell mommy, don't tell sister, we get a big bear in the woods, whatever the hell, right? I'd be embarrassed for us.
Yeah.
That's why I do what I do. I'm tired of being embarrassed.
Yeah, of course. So the congressional hearing, that was your work?
Citizen hearing.
The citizen hearing, sorry, congressional. Right. How did you come up with that idea? What was your plan for doing this?
My plan was exactly what took place. I came up with the idea in 2001, roughly. It seems so obvious. I mean, such a clear project to do. Now, I actually put up a website all the way back in 2001. One of these early crude sites. It was not particularly nice. Well, I thought it was nice, but ultimately it was so. But I couldn't raise the money. It was hundreds of thousands of dollars to do it. I knew that. I tried a little bit, but I just couldn't raise the money. If I'd have had some deeper drive or whatever, I might have, I don't know, robbed a bank or something. But I couldn't raise the money. But then one day the money showed up, and I was able to do it. And what happened on April 29 to May 3, 2013, is exactly what I had in mind 12 years earlier, except that it cost a lot more than even I thought then, a lot more. And it's all on tape, and it's all in the record. It didn't have the impact it might have had, but it had an impact, and it did set the stage for the 2016 election campaign, which started early. That's the way we roll here in the United States. We like to start our campaigns right after you get elected, and we like to make them as expensive as possible so that you get a chance to buy the government that you wish you had. So the campaign was underway by the end of 2014, which was only about 18 months after the mock congressional hearing, citizen hearing. And so I just worked from that and right into the campaign. And that was a successful project. And we got Hillary on record, Mom on record, her husband on record, Podesta on record, in the middle of the campaign. Hundreds of articles, all still there, all archived, all readable to this day, and might have triggered disclosure. We certainly put Clinton in a position, because eventually I figured she's going to disclose. It's not going to happen under Barack, okay. But all of those articles, all that coverage would have put her in an impossible position if she changed her mind, meaning, I'm president now. I think maybe we should keep this embargo on for a while. No, she would have been besieged.
She met Lawrence Rockefeller, I think, Hillary Clinton.
She knew him, and he was a supporter of the Clintons. He was supportive of but this is all the way back in the early 90s.
Yeah.
Sure. She knew Rockefeller, and of course she met him. She's been to his ranch. But he started to get dementia, eventually died not long after the Rockefeller Initiative was over. But he made an effort. Lawrence made an effort. He could have done more. I learned from one of his daughters that while she supported what Lawrence did, his help for Mac, his help for a number of people in the field. I think even Colin Andrews. I think he brought some money to him. Maybe Lyndon Moulton, pretty sure. And then of course the Rockefeller Initiative. But the rest of the family did not like it. The rest of the family were opposed, which I think prevented him from getting really serious. He had threatened during the discussions in the early part of the Rockefeller Initiative, because they were dragging their feet. He threatened to put a full-page ad in every major newspaper in the country, calling for these files to be released. And they said, "Okay, wait a minute, Lawrence, let's talk." He should have done it anyway. He could have put an ad in every major paper in the country once a week for 2 years. He was a billionaire, but he didn't go that far. I think there's enough pushback that he kept it within range, and then before he could maybe take it to the next level, he was in a weakened position, and he'd lost a lot of his faculty. So he came close, and he will get a lot of credit in history for that effort. Which ultimately the Rockefeller Initiative, which of course Grant Cameron was the original researcher and got the documents that we all have now, and we'll go down in history for that. That really was the Rosetta Stone in a sense. It was the key milestone, really, I think is what I meant to say, that sort of made it easier to develop an exopolitical perspective on all of this. It got known, it was not denied, and it was a clear, much clearer indication of the president being stonewalled than, say, Carter. And we had the records and the documents. So once we had those, and of course I put them up on the web right away, we had bitten in to the issue at that point, and we weren't going to let go. We're like a bulldog at that point. We have bitten into the issue, and now we can't be shaken loose. And in that sense, it's extremely important to what is ultimately going to happen here. And they will get a lot of credit. They will get some legacy from this, but not the legacy they would have gotten if she had been the disclosure president.
So is it true that Rockefeller funded investigators like Stephen Greer and Linda Moulton Howe?
He funded a number of them, and it's very possible. I think Stephen Greer might have gotten some of that money. I think Linda did. Colin Andrews did. John Mack did. Rockefeller put up the money to defend John Mack against Harvard when Harvard put him under review because of the Time magazine article where a woman basically punked him, came in, pretended to be a contactee, and then set him up and went to Time magazine. So Rockefeller did a lot, but he could have done more. But he did what he did, and we're happy he did.
So our organization, we have every 2 weeks, we do Skywatch procedures in the field with equipment. Mm-hmm. We've done several in crop circles in England, and we saw some crazy things over the years in the skies.
I've heard some crazy things.
Yeah. So do you think that skywatching is an essential element in the overall disclosure?
Essential, not necessarily essential, but it is appropriate, and it doesn't hurt. It's a logical thing to do for anyone that has finally figured out that the ETs are here. Yeah. It's a positive thing. It's not violent. It's an engagement. It's like trying to say hello to your new neighbors. I like that. It's gotten some attention in press. Ambiguous to be sure, because that you're getting out to an area there where the press is easier to ridicule, though you don't see much of that anymore on anything. So it is more of an indication of where the people are than where the government is. The people are ready. They're holding festivals in Edinburgh and McMinnis and Roswell and in the UK. Festivals now, not just conferences. People are dressing up and they've got alien costumes on and they got all kinds of stuff and they're having fun. And then they're going out.
51.
Yeah, it's 51 has come back again. Only this time it's personal. And so this is the way the people are saying, look, we're fine, we're okay. Why don't you just tell us the truth? All right, stop using our fragility as an excuse for your intransigence.
That's also what John Podesta said. The people are ready.
Have a right to know. Yeah, he did.
Ready.
But when push came to shove, though, he hedged. He could have done more. All he had to do was call up a major columnist like Maureen Dowd and say, Maureen, Hillary would like to give you an interview about this subject. She'd have been there. Dowd would have been there, and she'd have been in an Uber in there in about 2 minutes. And Hillary could have given her an interview and blown this issue sky high. Podesta could have advised her to do that. They didn't. They played it safe.
Yeah.
Right? And let me tell you something. We've had situations where war was in the works, and there are people in government and they could have stopped it, but they played it safe. We can't afford too much more of that.
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
Safe is not right. It's safe is just like it's usually playing it safe is usually safe for you, not necessarily for the country. And so we need people that will take risks, personal risks.
Yeah, there's one over here.
What now?
There's one over here.
Oh yeah.
Because in Belgium, it's a difficult country to talk about these things.
Conservative.
Well, we are still in the phase that people laugh with it, ridicule it.
Really? I'm sorry to hear that.
We only had one media coverage in the 8 years that we were active. and we do it properly. We come forward with military files, we study files, we do skywatch procedures, we study crop circles, we have evidence, and still the media only gave us one serious interview.
Well, Bart, do you wait for the media to come, or do you go to them?
Both, actually, but in that regard, we need to do more action.
Because the media are just a bunch of people, and we're journalists by and large, and they have the rules that they follow and all that. They have professional protocol. They're just people. You treat them well, you treat them nice and with respect, and you approach them. You can make progress. If you view them as the enemy because they won't do what you want or whatever, then you don't make so much progress. Overall, but I understand what you're saying. You can never get enough. I've had a lot, it still isn't enough. I need a lot more than I've gotten. But what I do is, if you can get a list of emails for some of the media in Belgium, just occasionally send out a little notice saying what you're doing, and make it a little personal. Okay, personalize it a little bit instead of the to whom it may concern. Maybe pick 10 or 12 and just say, hi Bob, just want to drop in, let you know we're doing some research on this, or you may have heard about what happened with the Navy releases.
Yeah.
Eventually you can wear them down.
Yeah.
And they'll come around to you. But it actually takes work. Because if you're a journalist of any quality, there's people all over the country that want you to come deal with their issue.
Yeah.
So they're under a lot of pressure. They have a lot of people that want their attention. And generally, they're going to give it to the people they like.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that tip, Steve.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll make all the difference.
So let me see my notes over here. Do you think that the extraterrestrials, do you think that we are in quarantine and that they have an agenda by observing us, and they are like waiting for us to develop in some sort of galactic adult before they show more of them, before they show up?
This is a not unreasonable assessment. There are countless versions of this. We don't have enough information to be precise, clearly. But there's a lot of ways to interpret their presence.
I've studied lots of military files, and there are a lot of military guys who play with that. They think that is the truth.
Well, they're gaming it. Yeah. Now, if there's been direct contact between some governments and ETs, well, they may have very hard information about their agenda. I don't have that. In terms of the quarantine thing, it's a clever idea, and I get it. I actually have some sympathy with that theory. I think in a way we are quarantined, but not strictly. Obviously, we've been to the moon. We've sent craft outside the solar system. We've sent craft to Mars. We're cruising around our solar system. We haven't been stopped from that. However, there is one thing I think that they have considerable interest in that we're not going to be allowed to do, and that is, and I think they have a pretty good idea of the timeline, is that we're starting to nibble around the edges of not just antigravitics, but also interstellar travel. We're starting to sort of figure out how you circumvent the relativity barrier, right? The speed of light barrier. It just means knowing more about space and time than we currently know. And of course, we still have our wonderful nuclear weapons. And I think if there's a quarantine, it's this: we're not going to be allowed to build starships or ships that can make it between stars in reasonable time, or maybe even unreasonable time, and put a bunch of nuclear weapons on them just to be safe. We're not going to be allowed to do that. And I think one of the reasons that the engagement got underway when it did after the atomic bombs in Japan is that they knew how close we were to interstellar drive. They knew we had the weapons. They saw that we dropped them on people. There were a number of people in the Manhattan Project that made a strong case: do not drop these on a city. Drop these atomic bombs out in the bay. right? Scare the hell out of them, but don't drop them on a city. We chose to drop them on a city. That sent a pretty clear message. If I'm an ET and I see that, I'm going, okay, I get it. And so it was time to change the agenda. And suddenly sightings were occurring all over the world in early 47. So I think that's the quarantine. And now, okay, but what else? I think that the other thing going on is that we're not going, at the same time, we're not going to be able to take nukes into space, meaning they'll stop it, and easy to do. It's time for us to be engaged with them. It's time for us to be in open relationship with them. We're a global civilization. We've got pretty high tech. We're pretty sophisticated, really. Not everybody, but there's plenty of substantial human sophistication on the planet. So it's totally appropriate, I think, for us to be engaged with them prior to having interstellar travel. And somehow that engagement is going to result in the nuclear weapons being eliminated. In other words, that engagement will not go forward. We may have an engagement, but it's not going to advance unless we get rid of the nukes. And I think they can make a pretty powerful case why we need to do that.
Yeah.
And so I think that's another aspect of the agenda. So see, we're getting pretty complicated here pretty fast. But that's the interpretation I'm most comfortable with now. I may be wrong, and I may change that interpretation in the future. But right now, that's the one that makes the most sense, based upon the evidence that I have seen and what they've been doing and what we know about what they've been doing. And then there's a third thing. There's a scientific relationship. They are engaging us as a scientific matter, just as we do everything. But the same way, we engage ourselves in a scientific way. We engage all life on this planet, and we engage the cosmos itself. They're engaging us scientifically. A lot of genetics involved there. Hopefully one day we'll know the details of all that. Yeah. So there's three pretty substantial agendas right there.
Okay. How do you see the Paradigm Research Group evolving in the future?
Well, assuming that I can actually get off my butt often enough and get things done.
It's a trick question.
Well, this project that I mentioned, the reason that I'm in the press building, the reason I came back, is to start trying to engage Congress again, taking advantage of the new circumstances that the TTSA has set up. But I'm going to launch a podcast out of the National Press Building. It's called Disclosure Wire, one word, and it will be about all things exopolitical.
Yeah.
And directly and indirectly. I mean, there's a lot of issues we'll get into that are indirectly connected to the ET issue, which gives us some pretty good latitude. I have a co-host. Her name is Teresa Tyndall. She's currently the MUFON State Director, doing a great job. Has a substantial background, very, very, very relevant. So she's going to be an excellent co-host. And we'll record these interviews in the National Press Building. And it'll be the first podcast on this subject ever out of Washington, D.C., the first podcast or broadcast. Yeah. And I'm hoping we can take the issue to another level. I'm going to take advantage of my background, the press building, which, of course, is a very well-known building, and it's 2 blocks from the White House. The fact that I belong to the press club upstairs. All of this makes it possible for me, hopefully. And then Teresa has her own connections. We may see some people being interviewed by us in the near future who have never been interviewed before on this subject.
Well, there's a question that I'm dying to ask this. I'm a movie enthusiast, but what the hell? America is always throwing evil alien pictures at us.
Not always. There have been a number of pretty cool non-evil alien pictures. All right. And they've done pretty well. I mean, they don't do as well as the evil alien. I get that, but they've done pretty well. We all know which ones they are. Certainly 2001 Space Odyssey, the classic. Arrival is more recent, but very clever, very smart movie, very unusual. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Starman. So they're there, all right? And I assure you that if you were to interview people with some depth on these movies, you would find out that while uh, they might have enjoyed the evil alien movies they've seen, like Aliens 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever.
Great movies.
But the ones that moved them the most were Close Encounters and E.T. in 2001 and Starman and so forth. They will say emotionally they're the ones that move because I think human beings instinctively know that the aliens that are out there are not the evil aliens in our movies. It's the other ones that we're seeing by and large. And they just sense that. I don't think they have a logical explanation, though I think you can make a logical explanation, but they just sense it. And so we could use some more of those, but let's face it, if they're not making money, they're not going to get made. But the technology is now allowing us to do high-end sci-fi without having to spend a fortune. And so we may see some more of the more sophisticated ET-related movies. We'll see. That's all I want to say on that. The Hollywood and the film industry has done a lot to advance disclosure. The concept of extraterrestrial, because of film and television, is universal. It's everybody knows what that is. Everybody. And that's pretty powerful. When you've got 7 billion people and they all have a certain basic understanding of something, that makes that something very powerful. And so the movie did that. And so we're following behind them.
Are you aware of the fact that Steven Spielberg is mentioned in military files?
I'm sure he is. I'm sure that Lucas is. I'm sure that the big shots in Hollywood that make movies that have impact are in the files. They know how much impact, and because there's also people that are directing and producing movies not about ETs, but they're about government abuse of power, right, and so forth. And I assure you that they keep track of all of them.
Well, have you seen the movie Paul with the gray alien, the comedy? Sure. Well, they hint on this, that Spielberg is actually working with that alien, and it's like if you have the files, if you read the files where his name is mentioned, he's definitely in the loop on some things.
I wouldn't be surprised. I've certainly called on Spielberg to maybe take a stand on this issue. He's chosen not to. In fact, he's run from it.
He's run from it for the moment.
I think we have had a live alien or two. I don't think we have them now. And I think it's been a while since we've had a live alien. Now, unless, of course, the ETs are actually directly engaging the government, in which case, but that we don't have them. They're coming to the meeting. That's a different thing. Yeah. But Paul was basically a captured ET. And there were some captured ETs, basically survivors of the crashes.
The Roswell crash, yeah.
What they learned from them, I have no idea. Well, but I assure you, Steve Spielberg knows a lot more than he will say publicly. And I'm not going to argue with that. Mm-hmm. He has a full family. He has a lot of responsibilities. A lot of people owe their jobs to him. So the idea that he would mess with all of that by challenging the government's policy, it's easy to say if you're not him. But I don't have a problem with it. I have nothing to lose. I have nothing to give up. This is what I do. So yeah, I can say any damn thing I want.
Well, the document, Steve, that talks about Spielberg hints on him being one of the earlier drip feeders through movies to get the public awareness going.
Of course. Well, look at Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Yeah, it's right on the mark.
That was, there's rumors that was essentially the Holloman Air Force Base case that was handed to him. In fact, the file on that was handed to him not about a year before we got that case. Complex story there. But look, people like Spielberg and others at the highest end of Hollywood that are dealing with this subject matter, they know a lot more than they would say publicly. And I think they're comfortable with the role they're playing. Look, Close Encounters of the Third Kind did more than maybe any other movie to get people really connected to the idea of extraterrestrial visit, extraterrestrial engagement in a positive light. It affected people deeply. You know, that alone, I think, is Steven Spielberg's legacy. Just that movie alone is enough. E.T. was fun, right? E.T. was fun, but not in the vague class of Close Encounters. And so he's made his contribution. Naturally, if you're a poor political activist, you wish that contribution would include a couple $100,000 your way, okay? So you know how much money goes into these movies. But there's a political situation here, and the more powerful you are, the more money you have, the more you have to risk in order to pursue this. And that has always been the case throughout all of history. The wealthy and the comfortable, they don't rush into these political activism. The people that tend to get in there are the people that really don't have that much to lose, or certainly willing to lose it. They're willing to make the sacrifice. That is the way it works. Doesn't always have to be that way, but that's kind of the way it works. So I've sort of accepted that, but there's a whole lot of very wealthy, knowledgeable people out there that could have advanced this advocacy movement very quickly if they had been able to step in that direction. But there's been some help, and there's been some advancement. So we just accept the history and the reality of it and move on.
Yeah. So you talked about the live aliens that we had, and of course that is related to the Roswell incident where 3 ships crashed. Well, not really crashed.
2 probably, maybe 3.
But they were probably shut down with some technology.
I don't think so.
So
after all these years, I believe that. First of all, the Roswell crash vehicles were not as sophisticated as the saucers that we've come to know and love.
Okay.
They were anti-gravitic, but also partially aerodynamic. They were chevron-shaped. The ETs that were in them were not the Greys. They were another type that, frankly, I don't think are seen anymore. I don't think they've been seen hardly since. I believe that circa 1944, 5, 6, 7, there were perhaps a number of species that were also hanging around, but are not as sophisticated as some of the others. And as things started to advance, they sort of needed to leave. It was like the show is about to begin, and so you need to leave the stage now. And that the vehicles that crashed at Roswell were not as sophisticated. And there was a massive lightning storm that night, and I think they got disoriented and crashed into each other in that storm. I don't think we had the ability to bring them down. People say, oh, well, we had some new radar. I don't think so. Maybe we had new radar, but I don't think that would have done it. The scalar?
Yeah. It's like
in 47? Not so sure. But the thing is that the punchline to this is that I attended the Roswell 1997 50-year anniversary deal. I was there, and they had a big event. I don't know. It might have been the last night. It might have been next to the last night. That was actually held at the hangar, the famous hangar where the material was sent. And Whitley Strieber was the speaker.
Oh.
And that night, a storm came in. And I'm telling you, I have never been in a lightning storm around me this intense. It was like massive claps of thunder, rattling the building, torrential rain, lightning strikes. It was amazing. And the rain was so intense, the water started moving into the hangar. It was flooding into the hangar, and it started moving across the floor. This is a big hangar, right? And we're literally watching that happen. And the rain on the roof of that hangar was so loud, you could not hear Whitley Strieber. He was on a PA system. You just couldn't hear him. It was just deafening. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's the kind of storm that happened that night 50 years ago. And these 2 craft, possibly 3, slammed into each other, and that's why they crashed.
Okay.
That's the one I like. I think the evidence points to that more than the other explanations.
Yeah. And does this have anything to do with the nuclear test sites over there in White Sands? Why the extraterrestrials are observing that
I
area?
think it does. I think that the nuclear connection is huge in all of this. It's a major factor in why they're doing what they're doing. Roswell was, of course, in July 47. The bombs were dropped in Japan August of 46. This is only about 9-10 months later.
Yeah.
You had a lot of activity in 47.
Yeah.
You had sightings all over the place. And we have no idea of knowing how many species were here, how many different groups were here, how many different types of craft, but a lot of sightings. So, and where were these sightings? They were everywhere. They were everywhere, but they were over the nuclear facility in Washington.
Yeah.
They were, of course, over in the area of Roswell, the nuclear air base. This, I don't think, is an accident. And so, since that's where they were focusing a lot of attention, that's where the likelihood of an accident would be higher.
Yeah.
And of course, New Mexico is known for some huge lightning storms, big time stuff. I didn't know that personally until that night. I've never even been close to I've never even been in the ballpark of a storm that intense. And it's now 22 years later, right? Never even close. And so I think that's what happened. And as a result, we ended up with the craft, we ended up with the bodies, and the government, no later than 47 July, knew absolutely that there was an extraterrestrial presence, that there was technology that possibly could be engineered, and they have been dealing with that ever since.
Well, Steve, I have 2 more questions for you, if that's okay.
Sure.
Seeing the time schedule. The Washington, D.C. event, 1952. Do you believe that the extraterrestrials came to return the dead alien that was still alive after the Roswell crash?
I know, it's a good story. I've heard it. I have no confidence in that. I don't know of any evidence that shows that. We know they were flying over the Capitol, and I think there was a reason for that. The way I see it is that, and there's a book called the Air Wars of 1947. Anyway, there's a book by Frank Ficino that talks about this early period, and we were trying to shoot them down, I think, in the early times, 48, 49, 50, 51. And according to Frank's research, some of our planes started falling out of the sky.
Yeah.
Wasn't not a lot of press about it. Remember, this is way back, 3 networks, local papers, but it's possible they were dropping some planes out of the sky. And the flyover in Washington was another way of reminding us, look, don't fool with us, right? Be cool, chill out, because we can do what we want, and this is not helping. But at minimum, what the flyover of 52 said to the government was, this issue is big, it's not going away, and it really motivated the government to engage it. The government chose, however, to engage it by embargoing it. That's what emerged from the Robertson panel. That was the policy that prevailed. They could have moved toward disclosure at that point, saying, look, they're flying over the Capitol. They're being seen around the world. Let's just get this out, and then all of us together can decide how to deal with this. But they took a different road. They decided, we're going to embargo the whole thing. We're going to pretend it doesn't exist. That's a fateful decision. And the reason why it's a fateful decision is that we know from between 52 and 1986, eventually 8 countries become nuclear countries and ultimately build and are housing something like 75,000 nuclear weapons, including 100 megatonners, right? Hydrogen bombs. And we almost had a war a couple of times. And the world was essentially under the Damocles sword for 7 decades. One could make a good case that if they'd taken the other route, if they had announced the ET presence at that point, meaning, folks, that's what was flying over Washington, We can't do anything about it, but we're hoping that we can engage these entities and find out what's going on. We might not have had a Cold War. We might not have built 70,000 nuclear weapons. Other people would say, oh, we would have had a war. And we would have definitely had a war because it would have made things more paranoid. I don't know. But it was a fateful decision, which I hope the historians will write about at length and parse it out for future generations. But what a moment. The Robertson panel meets to make a decision. How are we going to deal with this issue? And the reason they're motivated is because the damn things just flew over Washington for a week. We can't just pretend this isn't there. I mean, we have to do something. And they chose to, let's create an embargo. And that embargo is still in place, though it's falling apart and weakening daily. It's still in place. 67 years later.
A few weeks ago, I traveled to Barcelona to to see Nick Pope and John.
You heard Michio Kaku. You were there.
I was a few meters from him and on the VIP section. It was very interesting. But I know Michio Kaku is not really a ufologist, or he's not really in on the files. But it's an interesting show, and he's one of the top scientists, of course. But I had a good conversation with Nick Pope and with Jan Harzan. You know Jan Harzan from MUFON,
sure.
Executive Director.
Yeah.
And we talked about the alien intrusion project. Joe Jordan, I think, is on that project, and it's a documentary. And the thing is, this MUFON project talks about the dangers of extraterrestrial contact because they could be demons. Of course.
Who's behind? Wait a minute. Who's behind this project?
That's Joe Jordan from MUFON, and I think Redfern, the guy Nick Redfern.
Nick is exotic at times.
I'm
sure they'll have some fun with it. That's cool. I have zero confidence in the demonic interpretation of extraterrestrials. I'm not on board that train. I'm not even trying to get on board that train.
Yeah.
By the way, were you surprised at what Kaku said at the conference?
About
what he said was pretty significant.
About steal something in the.
Michio has always kind of tried to stay in the fence. He's not like what's his name? Dyson. He's not like him. He's tried to be cool about it, try to stay in the fence. But at the ufology conference in Barcelona, he made an extraordinary statement, and I'm paraphrasing, but it's easy to find the exact words. In fact, I think they've actually got it. You can find it on YouTube. He said the time for convincing the government that ETs are real is past. And now it's time for the government to convince us they're not real. Now, that's interesting for several reasons. First of all, he's clearly showing sympathy with the fact that there's plenty of evidence out there, and it's not getting the proper due, and so forth. And the government's position is not appropriate. But he did something else. Michio's a scientist. Okay? His colleagues are scientists. And so what he just said was, it's time for the government to prove a negative. Now, Michio Kaku knows you cannot prove a negative.
Yeah.
So in a sense, that's a faux pas. He could easily be attacked. What do you mean the government has to prove there's no extraterrestrials? You can't prove a negative like that. And so it's a silly statement. Well, in a sense it is, but he was willing to say it because it made the point he wanted to make. It's really what he's saying is it's time for the government to show us what they already know and to do transparent investigation, which is exactly what Christopher Mellon asked for of the government when he wrote the op-ed in the Washington Post. And that's the fundamental message. Look, tell us what you got and start doing open investigation, meaning, okay, we're looking into this now. We're looking into that now. Instead of classifying the hell out of this and telling us all it's nonsense. You're not helping anymore. You're hurting yourself. And so Michio has positioned himself a little closer.
Yeah. And
he will probably even go further as this thing advances. Mitchell, like, again, is a person with a lot to lose. He has a substantial career, reputation, following.
But he's definitely playing along now.
But he's now moving our way, but he's not prepared to go all the way because he still feels it's a risk to his status, his situation. I get that. It's okay. At least he's doing something. Yeah. And, of course, Bob Bigelow, praise be upon him, Bob Bigelow, of course, goes on 60 Minutes and says flat out there's extraterrestrials here. I don't know how much more you could have done. I mean, that's it. And only because of the political mess we're in, that did not become a major story. I mean, if it wasn't for if we were in a normal time and we'd have this political fiasco underway, he'd have been brought up in front of the Congress in a week.
Yeah.
Tell us more, Mr. Bigelow. You have a 20-year contract with NASA. You're a lot of tax money. Well, you're spending a lot of your money, but but being part of a taxpayer program. You say there's ETs here. What do you got? But no, not a peep, because again, we're right now, we have our thing, and Britain has its thing with Brexit, and not a hell of a lot else is happening. So that gives Belgium a chance to make some inroads into world affairs. I don't know, because we're all tied down here. So you guys should start making some big moves. I don't know what you want to do.
Well, I have a final question for you, Steve.
Yes, sir.
Which political contexts are you currently involved in to further advance the disclosure? And does this also involve John Podesta?
It doesn't involve John Podesta. They're not. I don't see them talking to me anytime soon, because I gave them a hard time for 20 years. I didn't make it easier for them. That's for damn sure. But the fact is, I just got into Washington. I've just set up the office. The camera equipment is not here yet. We've got to get that together. So I haven't really engaged anybody since I came back. I was away for 3 years. But when I get this podcast going, and by the way, my co-host, Teresa Tyndall, she's registered as a lobbyist now. She's a federal registered lobbyist, which is that's just protocol. You do that. It's not a big deal per se, but it gives you a certain gravitas. It shows you're serious about it. And of course, you're complying with the law, because at some point, if you're not a registered lobbyist, the government can get a little twitchy about it. She's very aggressive. She's capable of just walking into the damn office and saying, I need to talk to the congressman right now. Well, he's not available. I'll wait. I'm not that way. So once you get this podcast going, I think I'm going to start seeing some meetings, but not just. It's not just Congress. With me, it's about 60% media, maybe 65% media, 35% politicians, and political staff. The media still got the most power to push this issue if it wants to, and it has more of a range of options. So I'm going to be going after the political media. In fact, I'll be extremely disappointed if you're not seeing me on Fox News and MSNBC as much as you see Nick Pope right now, who has practically moved in there. Yeah. I think they have a green room, especially for Nick. Right? It's got some British beer in there, some good white wine. It's just for Nick, because he's on all the time. Well, don't be surprised if I don't join him pretty soon.
Yeah.
We shall see. But I feel optimistic about that.
So, Steve, you're doing a marvelous job, and over here in Belgium, we love you. Really, it's
well.
Great.
Then I'll tell you what. Put together but not a full conference. Put together just a lecture. Get a nice lecture hall. A lot of theater seating. I'll come over. I'll give you a 3-hour presentation.
That's awesome. Yeah,
happy to do it.
Well, okay, we'll keep you to it.
All right. Very good. You don't have to put a whole big conference together. Just a lecture. Just me. It's real simple and cheap. And maybe, who knows, given any circumstances, 500, 600, 800 people might show up. You never know.
We'll put Michio Kaku before you. You are the main event. And that.
Okay, yeah, Michio could open for me. That would be pretty cool, actually.
Yeah.
And he might do it. Because I think he understands this issue is important. And I think that it would be a way for him to show what we ultimately need to see is some deferential behavior from the scientific community towards this extraordinary issue and the people that have serviced it for these 70 years, while they were not, unless they were working in government in a black program, in which case, okay, they were involved. But so who knows? Mitch, you might agree to open for Steve in Belgium.
Are there any things you like to say to the Belgium network, the people who are working over here?
Well, I've known that you all had a number of projects going. I remember one way back when I was going over to do the speaking tour in 2008. Keep it up. Keep the faith. The government will come around.
Yeah.
And I invite people to get on my website and subscribe to my updates. ParadigmResearchGroup.org. There's a subscription thing there. It's free. I want as many people on the list as possible. There's a lot of information there, particularly on upcoming conferences. I keep those up there pretty up to date. And don't hesitate to email me if you have a question.
Yeah,
Anyone
sure.
in Belgium has a question, just email me. I'll be happy to give them a response.
Sure. So, okay. Thank you very much, Steve. It was awesome to do this with you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, Bart. Great. I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, we will talk soon. Okay.
Bye.
Bye, Steve. Goodbye. Thank you.